Shabbat Shalom. The name of this week's Torah portion is Hukkat, and it comes from the word chok. And there's a special time in Jewish liturgy where we hear this idea invoked. And I want to begin there and sort of unpack what that message is and then apply it to this week's Torah portion. And this time is when someone in the middle of a meal looks at what everyone is doing and cries out, Ma hachukim ha'edut v'mishpatim ha'ela. What is the chok? What is the edut? And what are the mishpatim that you are doing? Does this ring a bell yet to anyone about what I'm referring to? I'll give another hint. It's the first of 4 questions raised by 4 children who are sitting at a meal together. Now, have I planted the right seed? Yes, Sophia. Pesach, okay? It is the 4 children, and each child is asking a question about the meal. And the first one who goes is the who? The wise child. The wise child question is, what are the, chukim, mishpatim, and edut. That's correct, that's the order. What are the choks, what are the mishpatim, and what are the eduts? So let's unpack what he's asking about. Does anyone know what a chok is? A chok is a Jewish law that God said so and we follow it. It doesn't carry a rational explanation. Nachmanides says, well, maybe it has to do with the natural order of the world, but overall, everyone else says it's one of those things that God says, and there really isn't a rational explanation. Anyone know of a mitzvah that can be understood as a chok? Kashrut. God says this is the type of food you can eat, this is the type of food you can't eat, and that's it. No rational explanation. Okay. Everyone agree with that, by the way? Okay. Something to think about. Edut. An aid is a witness. And there are specific commands that we follow because by doing them, we are witnessing, we are offering testimony to something that took place in Jewish history, but most importantly, something that God did in Jewish history. Does anyone have an example of a mitzvah like that? Bernie? A bris. Oh, yeah, great. We're doing a bris, and we are being reminded of what Abraham did long ago. Very good, yep. By the way, we all just did one. When the Torah was taken out, what did we all do? Before we even kissed it, it was the first command, direction that I gave. We all stood. Why do we stand? We're offering testimony to what famous act that took place long ago in Jewish history? Receiving of the Torah. Hey, everyone, look, I believe, right, that this happened long ago. We received the Torah, and we're recreating that moment. There's many times where we stand, and for the most part, many of the edut that are done, we are standing. So we begin Shabbat. And what is one of the ways we begin Shabbat? Say it again. Light the Shabbat candles. Excellent. And the other way is Kiddush. And we stand for Kiddush, and we say, Yom HaShishi, Vayechulu HaShamayim Va'aretz. And the 6th day, right? After the 6th day, on the 6th day, God had finished completing the heavens and the earth, right? And God created Shabbat. And we're offering testimony that God did that. By the way, okay, that's edut. And then there are mishpatim. Mishpatim are commands that we do to enable justice to occur in this world. Can anyone give an example of a mitzvah that brings about or helps facilitate justice in this world? Thank you so much, right? That's if we were playing Family Feud, that would be the number one answer, right? Show me tzedakah, right? Ding, 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 right? Yes, very good. Anyone else? You can think of different forms of tzedakah, the corner of our payah, the corner of our field. You could think about the idea of on Purim, we give matanot levionim, gifts to the poor. Many different ways that we can look at acts of mishpatim. Now, when Tom first made his point about kashrut, I said, does everyone agree? And the reason why I asked is that you could make an argument that there is an element of mishpatim to kashrut because they help remind us of an order to the world that we live in, that there's this idea of kashrut, that when we are what we eat, we don't eat animals that eat other animals. And that's a reminder to us that we strive to live in peace and harmony with the world around us. And I share that example because there's overlap. It's not 100% clear that what is a full edut, what is a full chukim, what are full mishpatim. Rather, they are three lenses of how we can look at our Judaism. And that, in many ways, might have been the question that the wise son was asking. He was seeing complexity in Jewish ritual. And he was asking everyone on the table, okay, who's doing this because God said so? And are we all doing this because God said so? Is there an element here that is linked to justice? Is there an element here that reminds us that we are in partnership with God? And each of these three categories highlights a different element of the relationship that we carry with God. Chukim are laws that we identify with or we do because God said so. God is the principal actor. Edut are things that if we did not do, God's story is not known. So in many ways, the power rests with us, but of course, we don't do them if it wasn't for God. So edut highlights laws that we do as a result of a partnership that we share with God. And mishpatim are ones that we do because we want to live in this world. And if we are going to live in the world, then we want to try to make sure that there's balance, that there's peace, that there's harmony, all of which contribute to order and justice. So we are the principal actors of this. We could totally destroy this world, and that would upset God, but God would continue existing. Mishpatim are things where we have everything at stake. So now let's go to this week's Torah portion. And there's a very strange story. Many of us are going to be familiar with it. I'm on page 884. Miriam died, and I'm on verse 2. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. Those who've been following along this past weeks, knowing this is not the first time that the people of Israel stand up against Moses and Aaron. Number of rebellions, they are all squashed. There's all major punishments that are doled out. And yet, here we are once again, the people of Israel are rising up. And what are they saying? If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into the wilderness for us and our beasts to die there? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There's not even water to drink. The people of Israel are complaining. They say, I want to go back. And why, by the way, if we could look at this point of the story, what might be two reasons that they are so upset? Miriam passed away. They might be grieving. And two, they're thirsty. There's no water. Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. The presence of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." God has got a solution. The people are thirsty. Okay, what is the instruction? What are you going to do, Moses and Aaron? You're going to take your rock, you're going to take your rod, and you are going to what? Say it again. Touch the rock. And before you touch the rock, what's the key piece? What? Before you smack it, there's a really big piece here. You're going to order it. You're going to ask, Mr. Rock, I'm going to hit you, and you're going to give us some water. And then, as you correctly said, the rock is hit. And then the water will come out. But what does Moses do? He takes the rock from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. We're in this liminal moment. So is this cool? Is everyone great? Was God's command fulfilled? And we find out in verse 12, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them." God is upset because Moses does not ask permission. Rabbis also say Moses gets upset. He's angry. You can see it in you rebellious people. And God punishes Moses and tells Moses, because of this, you are not going to make it into the land of Israel. So, is this story, when we tell this story, an example of a chok, God's will? Can't make sense of it, but it's God. Is an example of a dut, that there is partnership here? Or is an example of mishpatim, an act of justice that helps enable balance in this world? Tom?
I've always thought of it more as folk where, like, he's supposed to talk, and instead he whacks the
Mm-hmm.
rock, and that's like the wrong thing. But as I'm reading it here more, the instruction seems a little ambiguous to me because he says take the rod, and I gotta have a purpose, right? Take the rod, and then order the rock. What does ordering mean? Is he supposed to talk to it? Is he supposed to whack it? I think he's being a little vague, and it almost seems like God's more upset that we're not in partnership with him, and that he just kind of did his own thing. So I'm not really sure at this point because there's a couple of things.
There's a lot of dynamics going on. There's a lot of actors going on here. But I appreciate you starting with just saying, at first glance, you might think this is just a chok one, right? That like God says, so we don't really understand why God would ask a human being to talk to a rock, right? And it seems to be one of those things where there was a chok that wasn't followed, and there was a consequence. Okay, good. And then it's like, well, maybe the story is more complicated. You could also see this as an edut, where God wants to demonstrate to the community that God cares about us and God will nourish us. But God needs a partner to stand and represent God in front of the people of Israel, and thus that's Moses and Aaron, and they are to enable that act of water coming forth to happen. But I want to share with you the idea of mishpatim because it comes from a teaching that I recently learned from Dr. Arne Eisen, who's the former chancellor of JTS. And he says that even though this story seems very sad and tragic, because in many ways we just feel the loss of Moses, that it actually is, according to him, a very redemptive story. And introduces us to the world of Mishpat. And let me explain. It's a very human story. You're dealing with a leader who is grieving, who is tired, and experiences the natural consequence of those two emotions, which is anger and frustration. And even though it's a natural consequence, he makes the wrong choice. And whereas we're sad to see Moshe make that wrong choice, we can identify with him. Moshe, at this moment of the Torah, becomes less of a idea, an image, a divine being, and he becomes a human leader. The Torah is starting to bridge itself from the peaks of the heavens or the peak of Mount Sinai and is beginning to descend to the world in which we live in. And the world in which we live in is one where we can make mistakes, where we feel things, where emotions impact the choices that we make, and we are tasked with the very human challenge that angels do not face, which is to manage our emotions. And had God at this moment given Moses a pass, saying, no big deal, motions, you do what you want, because you are going to be the eternal leader of the people of Israel, Moses at this moment would become someone that we cannot connect to or relate with. And it's very close to saying, we can add on, that at some point Moses had to stop being our leader. Moses could not be the physically eternal leader of us. Otherwise, we can't really dwell in this world because we live in a world of limitations. We live in a world of mortality where we will face an end to our physical lives. So God is teaching us through Moses, or perhaps Moses is displaying through himself, that we do live in a world of boundaries, and that now it is our work to be able to manage within these limitations. And that, in many ways, is the work of justice. God's word does not simply govern the way that we live, but rather we are dependent on each other to make the right choices and to manage our thoughts, our feelings to the best of our abilities so that we can create the best image of the world that we live in, given our abilities. And that is what Moshe is bringing to us at this very sad point. And the truth is, if this story does not happen, justice does not descend in the world in many ways, and the story becomes irrelevant, not capable of being passed on, not capable of being put into action, and rather returning to the place where it once descended from. But because we have Moshe, because we have these sad moments, we can learn from them, relate to them, and the story lives on. Shabbat Shalom.